I sat in the stiff plastic chair beside my son's hospital bed, the sterile hum of machines punctuating the silence. His small hand was warm in mine, though he was pale and restless, trying to grip the edge of the blanket like it might steady him. I glanced at my phone again, though I already knew what awaited: a text from my wife. "I'm moving to Miami with him. I took all our savings. You're on your own, boss." I read it once, then set the phone face down, as if turning it away could erase the words. My fingers tightened around my son's hand, feeling the pulse beneath. He didn't understand the magnitude of what had just happened, and for once, I was grateful for his innocence. "Good luck," I replied, almost automatically, before I could rethink it. The words were neither cruel nor desperate, they were neutral, a small shield against the storm of betrayal. I looked at him then, his small features scrunched in discomfort, and something inside me shifted. Anger surged for a moment, sharp and electric, but it was quickly eclipsed by clarity. This was not the time for theatrics. There was no dramatic confrontation here, only consequence and quiet strategy. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander backward, through fragments of memory. Morning coffee on the kitchen counter, her laughter ringing as she talked about dreams she never mentioned, arguments about bills, about vacations, about trivial inconveniences that in retrospect were signposts of an underlying fracture. None of it screamed Miami or theft, but in hindsight the trajectory was clear. I had been patient, hoping for stability. And now, faced with betrayal at its most exposed, I realized patience had to evolve. The hospital was a quiet chaos. Nurses moved briskly between rooms, doctors checked charts and murmured to one another. No one could see my turmoil, no one would intervene unless I asked. Yet in that anonymity, I discovered a subtle leverage. I might have been stripped of our savings, but authority, legal, medical, procedural, was still something I could invoke. My power was no longer in confrontation, but in the calm application of systems that were impartial but effective. I pictured her arriving in Miami, unbothered, certain she had gained control. Perhaps she did, temporarily, yet the very structure she ignored, banking protocols, legal filings, custody regulations, was a framework in which I retained quiet influence. My anger was irrelevant, my leverage remained intact. Hours passed. My son's fever spiked and dipped, and I alternated between checking his vitals and staring blankly out the window, letting the fluorescent light bleach the edges of my panic. I didn't call her. I didn't send another message. I simply waited, breathing deliberately, allowing myself to observe. There was power in restraint. Then, unexpectedly, a social worker appeared. She carried a clipboard that smelled faintly of disinfectant and authority. She asked questions in a professional, calm tone. I explained, succinctly, the text, the disappearance of savings, the abrupt plan to relocate. There was no accusation, no pleading. She nodded, scribbling, and then said quietly, "We can intervene. We can make sure he's protected. There are mechanisms in place, even across state lines." Her words did not feel like revenge. They felt like justice administered without drama, like the law functioning exactly as intended. And yet, the effect was palpable. I was no longer entirely on my own. My dignity, eroded by betrayal, began to return, not through confrontation or spectacle, but through recognition of structured authority acting on my behalf. I watched my son doze, eyelids heavy, fingers curling around the blanket. I marveled at his resilience, his unspoken understanding that life continues even when adults fail. He had no idea of the text, of the Miami flight, of the money gone. His world was narrowed to the steady rhythm of my presence, and in that, I found the beginning of clarity. In my mind, I traced the consequences. Her independence in Miami, taken through sudden force, was not without cost. Legal processes, bank verifications, and custody concerns would follow her, unseen but inevitable. Her power, gained abruptly, was tempered by institutional reality. I could not celebrate her misfortune, it was not mine to claim, but I could note it quietly, as a matter of fact, as the world catching up to choices made without foresight. And so I stayed beside my son, each hour passing with small, deliberate attentions. I checked his IV line, adjusted the blanket, murmured words he half heard. My own anger faded into something slower and more durable, a recognition that dignity was not in spectacle, nor in punishment, but in presence and calm decisiveness. I could protect him, preserve my integrity, and allow consequences to unfold in their natural, measured course. I thought of the text again, the sting now dulled. Good luck. It was neither resignation nor triumph, only acknowledgement. In that one phrase, I had conveyed boundaries, composure, and clarity. I had refused the trap of reactive emotion, chosen strategy over chaos. Hours stretched into evening. My son slept, and I sat watching, reflecting on the fracture between what had been and what remained. I was neither whole nor broken, simply present. This presence, silent, vigilant, and controlled, was my victory, not ostentatious, not performative, not cinematic, simply true. Outside, night fell. Miami was far away. The text, once incendiary, now felt distant. I was here, with my son, and though the future was uncertain, the immediate was intact. Power, it seemed, need not roar to be undeniable. Authority, properly applied, need not dramatize. And dignity, once reclaimed, moved quietly, steadily, like a pulse under the skin. I adjusted the blanket over him and leaned back in the chair. Silence reigned, punctuated only by the hospital's rhythmic machinery. I did not feel victorious in a cinematic sense. I did not feel triumphant. I felt contained, composed, and quietly empowered, a man who had been betrayed, yet had chosen to remain whole in the only place that mattered. And in that quiet, measured space, I realized sometimes victory is simply the choice to stand upright, to breathe, to witness, and to wait.